Hello, vagina. Cheers to being a woman. But womanhood, it's a jungle down there. Get ready to be real, raw, and totally uncensored as we explore the depths of health, sex, motherhood, and relationships. Strap in for those topics that make you cringe, make you blush, and make you want to hide your face. Welcome to the Hello Vagina podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Hello Vagina podcast. With me today, I have a very special guest. We have Keira Trainor. She is a wife, a mama of two boys, a primary school teacher, and a blogger. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We are going to dive deep into a topic today that is really not discussed and that I think for a lot of people we had never heard of. It's something that I had never heard of before. We're going to talk about prenatal depression and anxiety. Can you share with us a bit around your story?
Yep, definitely. So I'll try to narrow it down, but so obviously I'm a mum of two boys, and before becoming pregnant with Arlo, who is my eldest, so we got pregnant straight away, first time trying, thought this is fantastic, and I didn't really, know a lot about pregnancy, things like that. And then at our 13-week scan, we were told that there was no heartbeat, and obviously that the baby had passed away. So to me, that was a huge shock, because for that whole 13 weeks, I had every pregnancy symptom under the sun, no bleeding, nothing at all, and had no idea whatsoever that I was actually no longer pregnant.
Yeah.
So it was quite, traumatic. I had to have a D&C, and it was just a massive shock, because I'd heard about miscarriage and things, but it was like one of those things I just thought would never happen to me.
Yeah.
So after that, I was quite, upset and stressed, and straight away I started to fear that I would never get pregnant and never have a baby. It took us about 8 months, and then we to fall pregnant again. I think I did all different diets, acupuncture.
Yeah.
Went off alcohol, everything you name, to try and fall pregnant.
Yeah.
And then we did luckily fall pregnant with Arlo, and obviously at first it was exciting, but then straight away I started to feel stressed that the same thing would happen again. And obviously everyone told me, that's okay, you're going to be stressed after what's happened. So we had our first scan at 8 weeks, which was like the dating scan, and, everything was fine. And I thought, after that scan, okay, well, after that happens, I'll be okay. And then I started to think, okay, no, once we've had the 12-week scan, I'll be okay. And that one came, and it was fine. And probably for about a day, I did feel relaxed and like, okay, this is okay, it's going to happen. But then straight away, I went back to this just overwhelming sense of worry and stress and anxiety that no, something's going to go wrong. Every time I had any ache or pain, which, as we know, is quite common in pregnancy. You do get lots of aches and pains, but every time I had anything, I would ring my husband at work and say something's wrong, and we'd go to the emergency department, just because I needed that reassurance that it was okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time I would be there trying to just make them do a scan, because I just wanted to see like that heartbeat on the screen to know it's okay. And a fair few times that happened. And then I think you have the 20-week scan, and again, I would feel okay. I was told everything's fine. It's a healthy baby. And for like a week, I would, feel at ease, but then the worry would come back again. And it became like it just consumed me. Everyone was, saying, no, it's normal. Like as soon as you get pregnant, you start. So people would say to me, as soon as you get pregnant, you become a mum and you worry and you'll never stop worrying. And so I would think, okay, it's normal. Like I'm just worried. I've had a miscarriage. I'm just worried. But looking back now, like I know it wasn't normal. Like the worry and the anxiety just consumed me. Like it sounds terrible, but in my mind, I just honestly could not visualize myself giving birth to a live baby. Like I just did not believe it was going to work. I put all the, negative feelings down to hormones and, I thought, well, it's normal to worry and stress, but I was just consumed by fear the whole time.
Yeah.
And I guess something that really, worries me is, so I had my baby in the public system, and so I would have, I think, every 4 weeks at first you'd have a midwife appointment, and they would do, your fundal height check and everything. But not once in any of those appointments was I ever asked, like, how are you feeling mentally? Like, so because I was never asked, I never voiced my concerns. The only person that really ever heard how I was feeling was my poor husband. I would cry to him every day and just tell him how stressed and worried I was. And he would tell me to tell someone, and I would sit there and I'd say, yes, I'll tell them. But then once I got to those appointments, because they never asked, I just never had the confidence to tell them that I wasn't feeling okay mentally. And so I just carried on and, fast forward to, actually, I remember like the whole time I was pregnant, I started to watch, the show Offspring, and I ended up, like, it was that bad, I ended up not being able to watch that show because in that show there's a few negative, like, episodes where there might have been like a stillborn or things, and like I would watch those episodes and then it would consume me for days because I would believe, no, that's going to happen to me, like that's me. And I just would cry anytime anything happened on TV with a baby. I also went through these times of thinking that if I didn't give birth to the baby, live baby, I was going to die. I also went through a stage of thinking that I was going to die from having the baby. So it really, I did consume me a lot. The day I was induced, so the day I walked in to be induced, I was just like an absolute mess. I was crying so much. And I remember the midwife saying, what's wrong? And I just like said I was scared. And again, she just said, oh, that's okay. It's normal to be scared. And again, they didn't know just how, anxious and everything I was like. And then once he was born and, obviously it was beautiful. Like I was so happy. I finally had this baby, and probably, only like 24 hours, or I think it was as soon as we brought him home, it pretty much then changed to this fear of SIDS. And I was just petrified to put him down and not watch him. I was petrified he was going to like die in his sleep. And it just, the whole thing consumed me. And it wasn't until I think it would have been 6 weeks later, because it was when I took him to his 6-week checkup at the nurse, like the children's nurse, and she finally asked, they do like the mental health check there. And obviously I didn't do very well on that screening, and then she asked all about what has been happening, and it was her that realized, like, whoa, okay, this is not normal, and sent me straight to my GP. And straight away I was sent for counselling, and I ended up making the decision to go on the anxiety medication. And like, I know they sometimes say that those medications can take, a few weeks to get into your system and help. But for me, I was very lucky. Like, honestly, like within a week, I just noticed this massive difference, because for me, every time Arlo cried, it was like, it just scared me. Like, I remember just thinking, if he was crying, it must mean there's something terribly wrong. But obviously babies cry. And for me, it was every single time he cried, I was just so stressed and concerned that there was something wrong. I wasn't able to go out because he was not good in the car.
Yeah.
He would scream every time in the car. So every time I went out, as soon as he cried, I'd be crying myself. I'd have to pull over, try and breastfeed him, and I would ring my husband in tears saying, I can't get home. I'm too scared to drive. He's going to cry again. And once I did start the counselling and medication, things drastically improved. And, look, I've had a second baby since then. I've got Cohen, and I saw a psychiatrist, and we made the decision for me to stay on the medication with my pregnancy with Cohen. And it was a complete different pregnancy, like 100% different. Even though, yes, I did, I had a baby, so things were different. I knew what was, normal and not, but there was none of that consuming worry. There was normal worry, like that, every mum would have, like a bit of worry. Oh, I hope the scan goes okay, things like that. But there was none of this, like, constant thought process of negativity.
Yeah.
And I think that's the
consuming
difference.
dread.
Yes. And I think that's the difference. And what I would say to mums is, like, if you're just feeling like you're constantly thinking negative and you can't, like, see positivity in it, then it's not right. Like, yes, worry is okay. And yes, as a mum, you do worry sometimes. But if all you're thinking is like these negative thoughts and you're constantly worried, then you do need to talk to someone.
Yeah, no, that's such an interesting story. And I think something that will definitely resonate with a lot of women. Having a miscarriage is something that it's definitely a really difficult process to go through. I had one at 6 weeks, so it was really early on. I got a late pregnancy, positive pregnancy test, had a blood test the next day. The doctor's like, look, your readings are pretty low. It generally means you're either going to miscarry or you're just a really slow climber. And then by the time I was going back the next day to get my blood results, I'd started to miscarry. So I really only had a day of being excited about being pregnant. And I know how much of a mental game that is. You know that miscarriage happens for a reason and that there's something wrong, but it doesn't take away from the fact that you really badly wanted this baby.
Yeah.
And it's being taken away from you. But I guess a lot of people don't sort of think about that. The next stage to that is like when you then fall pregnant again, is having that, those feelings. And I think we probably should be reaching out more and talking to people through those feelings and not keeping them in yourself.
And I think that's a problem as well with society. As we all know, there's this common, like, consensus that you can't share a pregnancy till, you're 12 weeks or 13 weeks in the safe zone.
Yeah.
Which was like with me. And then there is that thing when if you have a miscarriage, everybody just says, oh, it wasn't meant to be, or things. But so that was the problem I had too. I didn't feel I really had enough opportunity to grieve that loss. And I almost felt like it wasn't, like I was wrong for feeling, sadness, because people say, it just wasn't meant to be, and it wasn't that long and everything. So that in itself, I think, needs to be changed as well, that we need to it needs to be okay for people to grieve a miscarriage. And whether it was for a day, an hour, or whatnot, you still had something alive in your body, and it's definitely still a loss.
And it's that, I think the biggest thing that you're grieving is that you wanted it so badly. So you can understand that the science or the biology of why it didn't and why our body does these things. But that doesn't take away from the fact that you want to be a mum, and that you were, and then you're not, because it, as soon as conception occurs in any way, you, like you said, you are. And I think that we need to, miscarriage is something that we definitely don't talk enough about, for something that is, once you start to talk to a lot of women, you find out, it's like one in two are like, oh, I've had a miscarriage, whether it's, at 6 weeks or that little bit longer, or, people that get a lot further through their pregnancy. I obviously think it's probably harder the longer that you go through and the more time that you've had with this pregnancy, because the more attached you've become. But it doesn't mean that you're going to grieve any less for a short term, and that we do need to sort of talk more about miscarriage. And make it less covered and less taboo and less, you know, something that you just keep behind your closed doors, like that it's your loss, don't talk about it. I think if we definitely opened up that communication channel, it would help to move through the grieving process of being able to talk about it and acknowledge that it happened. And I think it's that lack of acknowledgement that definitely makes it a lot harder.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Definitely.
Another great point that you touched on too was that definitely, you know, talking to your doctors, it is a little concerning that we're not being asked. It is a mandatory part of your 6-week postpartum checkup, but that it's not a question that's asked. And like you said, sometimes you don't, if it's not asked, you just don't know how to approach. And I think we're really programmed as women to have it together and
Yes,
to just
yeah.
deal with it. So to put your hand up and say, I'm not okay,
No, I know.
is something that we're almost subliminally programmed to not say.
Yeah. And because I think when you go to those appointments, it's all about the baby or all about like the physical symptoms. They might ask you, questions like, have you had any discharge? Have you had any of this? It's all the physical things.
Yep.
So I think at every appointment, it should be mandatory that they ask as well, and how are you feeling mentally?
Yeah.
I think they really need to start bringing that into whether you're going through an obstetrician, whether you're going through the midwives in the public system. I think it should be mandatory that they do ask, because as we all know, the big question is to say to someone, are you okay? And if someone's not asking you that, then a lot of people just slip, under what it's called, under the woodwork. Like a lot of people don't have the guts to speak up and say, no, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I think they only, obviously it's different with every hospital, and probably every midwife and whatnot. But I know like at the very first check-in appointment, they do ask you a bit about mental health. And in the public system, they also ask like if you're safe and like kind of gauge that you're not in a domestic violence situation. But after that was the only time in the whole 40 weeks or whatever it is that I was asked. So I think it definitely does need to be asked again. With my second pregnancy, because obviously on my paperwork, it was flagged that I did have depression and things. They organised for someone to come and see me after I had the baby. Yep. But again, in most of my midwife visits, I was still never asked, how am I feeling mentally? And that was even though it was flagged on my paperwork that I was on anxiety medication, I was still never asked.
Wow.
And I mean, luckily with my second pregnancy, I was okay. So it didn't matter that I wasn't asked. But when it's there, they should be asking the same way that if someone's got, diabetes, they would ask every week how their sugar levels are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy. I think the mental health space, it's definitely something that we're seeing more of, and where there's a lot of campaigns to try to push that need to talk. But we are, as a society, still so adverse to expressing our feelings of not being okay and not wanting to be labeled as crazy, and not wanting self-help. It is good to see that change of people approaching and getting coaching in all different aspects of their life, not just from a mental health space, but realizing and acknowledging that if you don't know something or you're not good at something, there's nothing wrong with getting some help. And but the mental health space is definitely still lacking in that, the stigma that it's had for so long about being not okay.
And there's a lot around postnatal depression. So that's why, like, once you have the baby, and each time whether the nurse comes to your house or whether you go to your appointments, they always ask you how you're feeling there, because there is so much known about postnatal depression, but not enough about like prenatal anxiety. So why you actually are pregnant.
And like you said, it was just sort of a given that you essentially, the prenatal just instantly turned into postnatal. So
that's it. And it is, I think the statistics are pretty high that if you have prenatal, it will turn into postnatal. Which you can understand why, because I guess if nothing's been done while you're pregnant, it's not really going to suddenly go away once you've had the baby. So
and it's those feelings of dread and over concern that then turn into you're just reshifting from, will this
Yeah.
baby come
It
out
just
alive
changes the
to will
type
this
of
baby stay
worry.
alive while it's on the outside. And it is obviously a different sort of, there's obviously postnatal depression is just a blanket term for depression in the postpartum stage of life, but there's obviously different causes of that. So, your postnatal depression may actually be stemming from a prenatal space of that over anxiety and that sense of dread that's about the baby, rather than, I think some people sort of think that the postnatal depression is that disconnect from your baby.
Yeah.
So that you can be, if you're having these really extreme feelings of dread for your baby, then that could also be a sign that you do have postnatal depression.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
definitely.
might be what it is, and that you need to talk to someone. It's also a good point to, as a friend and as a society, asking women. We hear sort of from mums all the time that, you have a baby and they're like, how's baby? Like everything's how's baby. But it's definitely a really good point to bring up to, ask your friend how they are. Ask the women in your life
100%.
how they are through their pregnancy, postnatally, checking on them. And like you said, sometimes it's that asking that then allows you to have that space to feel like you can open up and talk about it.
Yeah. No, I agree, definitely. I know I have a friend who's pregnant at the moment and sadly had a miscarriage first as well. And like I've said to her, I don't care how many times you ring me, I completely understand what you're going through, and ask me any question, no matter how silly it is, and just speak up if you're not feeling okay, because
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something that we need to be asking all the women in your life, even if they're not pregnant or having babies, it's definitely a question we need to be asking more. Are you okay? You can be a mum with toddlers, you still need to have those days, and we need to start opening those communications and to not be behind closed doors and suffering in silence, because for a lot of people, it is common to have these feelings, and we need to talk more about it and know that we have a safe space with our friends to converse, because it is, a lot of these things are feelings that lots of people do experience.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of, there's the stigma around, a lot of us just, put it down to saying, oh, it's just the baby blues, it's just hormones, and that's the problem. And then a lot of, myself included, just think, oh, okay, it's normal, it's just hormones, like it will go away.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't, sadly.
No.
So yeah.
No. What were some good resources that you found, or that you've found since, that might help someone that are feeling this way, or that helped you?
So I think definitely, obviously finding a good GP that you can speak to about it. And obviously, as we all know, not every GP's, great, and you might need to speak to a few before you find the right one.
Yep.
But yeah, so definitely finding a good GP that you can speak to, and then being referred to a good counsellor or psychologist to talk to. Obviously, one that can maybe sometimes specialise in women's good. The Panda, so the Panda website itself has some great resources I found, and they actually have like a section now on prenatal anxiety and depression. So those three things are definitely ones I would recommend. And then if you are going through the public system for having your baby, they do have a program called Safe Start, and that's working with any women who are identified as having some mental health problems, to try and help and make sure that they do have that positive start to parenting, whether it's your first baby or fifth baby. They do have that in place now as well. So there's some things that I would definitely recommend looking into.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. We'll pop those details across onto the website, so if anybody has wants to find more information about those, we'll definitely link those in the bio for this episode, so that people can get in touch and have a look at those resources, because I think that's something that we need, resources that you can look for. But it's good to know that there is, I guess, our health system's not necessarily asking the question, but that Safe Start program, I guess, is at least a step in the right direction for providing support if you can identify yourself.
Definitely. And I think trying to I've found on the Panda website, it does have, you know, a list of the symptoms to be aware of with like prenatal anxiety and depression. So, you know, recognizing that constant worry, you know, always feeling like something bad's going to happen. You know, you might have sleep disturbances, which obviously when you are pregnant, a lot of people sometimes do go through that insomnia stage, but also recognizing that can be a symptom as well. For me, in those later stages of pregnancy, from like the 30 weeks plus, obviously they tell you to be aware of your baby's movements. But so a good example was I became obsessed with that. So it would be nothing for me sometimes, especially if I wasn't working. So if I wasn't kept busy, it would be nothing for me to be at home and at least every hour sit there with a glass of ice water and start counting the baby's movements. And, you know, obviously it's good to count the baby's movements, but if it's consuming you, I think I went to the hospital, I don't know how many times at the end, with, you know, saying I had reduced movements when everything was fine. So
yeah, and I think it's that obsessive state. I think it starts from trying to conceive. I've had fertility issues, and you know, once you get into that obsessive state, I think you can even get, you know, into it in that trying to conceive, where, you know, you're like, oh, did my boob just tingle?
That was me.
You're like, you know, getting onto, I was on the forums and I'm like, you know, left boob tingle. Did you find out you were pregnant? Yep. And you're like, oh my God. And it just became so obsessive. You know, I'd never paid so much attention to my body before in my life. That it completely consumed me, that we had to stop trying because I was just consumed. It was my everything was about, you know, my boob tingling and checking your cervical mucus 500 times a day. Like, nobody should ever be checking their cervical mucus that many times. And then I'd never noticed it go egg white consistency.
Oh my God, I know. Even now, after I've finished having, well, not finished, but, you know, had my 2 kids, even now I still like recognize it and I'm like, oh my God, why are you thinking about that?
It's, you know, laying there with your legs in the air and you just, you know, it can, so much of the journey can fall into that obsessive state. And I think it's understanding what's, you know, what's a common concern, but when it becomes not normal and it becomes obsessive. And that obsessiveness, that's the real warning sign that it's what you're doing is not normal anymore. And that, you know, concern is and worry is common, and that happens and that's normal. But that obsessiveness where it moves into another state where it's all consuming is definitely where it's no longer normal, and we need to reach out for help, because it can definitely be a lonely journey because it's all internal. You know, guys, I think, don't understand as much, and they can try to help, but they don't really get it. So that's why we definitely need to be reaching out for support in that time when you are feeling consumed.
100%. Yeah, I always look back and think, oh, my poor husband. It's like what I put him through with all the phone calls and the amount of times he had to leave work to come to the hospital with me, or to just, you know, calm me down and everything like that. And even once I had the baby, you know, a few times he had to leave to come home to me because I just wasn't coping. So very lucky that he was very supportive though. So and that's another important thing, is to have that support network and, you know, someone you can talk to and voice how you're feeling. Because at least I had him. If I had no one, it just would have, you know, eaten me alive. The fact that I was just having all this worry, I always felt like I needed to say it. And a lot of the times he sometimes was able to bring me back to reality. So,
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. I'm sure that there's women that have sort of listening to this that have experienced that and can maybe sort of put their hand up now and go, okay, I know what that was and that's not normal, or women that are going through that.
Yeah.
At the moment, and the same if you're in your trying to conceive journey and you're at a point where it's all obsessive, definitely go talk to somebody.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Because it's not a healthy behavior.
No.
And it's definitely something that there is support out there for, and it's definitely worth looking into and getting that help. It's hard. You know, we think, I guess we sort of think that it's going to be easy. You know, bodies are designed to make babies.
Normal. Yeah.
You should just fall pregnant and it should just all work fine, and you should just be able to breastfeed fine, and everything should be this wonderful, magical Mother Nature thing. And it's not. That's not the reality for a lot of the times, and that's okay. It's okay that is not what happens for you. But there is help out there, and it's something that you need to reach out for and get.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
That's okay. Thank you so much for having me on.
We will pop those links that you mentioned for Panda and the
Safe
Start program on the Hello Vagina podcast website. And if people want to find you and follow you and your gorgeous boy's journey, they can find you over at
Raising Two Little Men.
That's right. Sorry, mental blank for 2 seconds.
It's like when I introduce myself, yes, I'm Raising Two Little Men.
And they can also check out your blog, which is Raising Two Little Men as well. So I will pop that link in the bio for this episode. But thank you again.
That's okay. Thank you so much.
And until next time. Thank you so much for joining another episode of the Hello Vagina podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you have, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode and you're notified when a new episode comes out. Also, we would love for you to tap some stars for us and to leave a review so that others can see how much you enjoyed the podcast and what we're all about. So don't forget, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, stay beautiful.